Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
You know how some moments don't just sting, they linger in your chest like a slow-burning fuse, ticking toward something explosive? That was Thanksgiving dinner at my Aunt Linda's house last year. The mashed potatoes were too salty, the turkey a little dry, and the air thick with that forced, smile until your jaw hurts energy that only extended family gatherings can bring. I'd taken the last slice of pecan pie not because I wanted it, but because it felt like the only power move left on the table. It didn't go unnoticed. Melissa, my cousin, the golden one, the one with the real estate license and the airbrushed engagement photos and the high school cheerleader smile that never aged. She was halfway through a second glass of white wine when she stabbed me with the kind of question only someone who already feels superior dares to ask in public. "So, Ryan," she said, dragging my name out like it tasted bitter in her mouth, "still doing that little art thing?" The room went quiet, not church quiet, but awkwardly silent enough that you could hear my mom's fork hit her plate quiet. A few people chuckled nervously, waiting to see if I'd fire back or do what I always do, smile like I didn't hear it. She looked at me with those polished, practiced eyes, the same look she used when she posted side-by-sides of her and her fiancé in matching hiking gear with captions like "power couple vibes." I could feel the heat rise in my chest, the pulse behind my eyes twitching like it wanted me to say something, anything, but I didn't. I just smiled. That quiet, knowing smile. The one that people mistake for weakness right before they realize it's something else entirely. She smirked. Victory. But here's the thing about people like Melissa, they think silence means defeat. They don't realize it can also mean restraint, or calculation, or the start of something bigger than whatever the hell they're celebrating. What Melissa didn't know, what no one around that table knew, not even my mom or my younger sister who always believed in me more than I believed in myself, was that 12 hours before, I'd gotten an email that changed everything. I hadn't told anyone yet because, frankly, I didn't believe it myself. I thought it was a scam, or some PR stunt, or some weird social media prank, but I clicked the link over and over again just to be sure. The subject line read, "Congratulations, selected for Times Square Artist Showcase." I didn't cry when I opened it. I didn't scream or fist pump or throw my phone across the room in disbelief like they do in movies. I just sat there, staring, rereading the words as my coffee went cold, my mind replaying every night I stayed up past 3, sketching for pennies, selling my work for less than minimum wage because exposure was the only currency I was ever offered. I'd been drawing since I was 7, copying comic book covers, designing fake band logos in the back of math class, doodling on napkins when I had nothing else. My dad used to say, "That's cute, son, but when are you going to do something real with your life?" He died before he ever saw any of it turn into something. Melissa, on the other hand, had been alive for all of it and treated every year I stayed freelance like I was one failed gig away from becoming a cautionary tale. So when she dropped that little insult across the table, expecting it to land the way it always did, right in the gut, twisting like a knife, I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I just smiled. Because I knew what was coming. She kept talking, rambling about her wedding planner and how hard it was to find elegant but affordable calligraphy, while I toyed with my fork and replayed the email in my mind like a secret I was almost ready to let slip. Not yet. Not tonight. Let her have her moment. My Uncle Doug leaned over and asked if I was still doing the online stuff, like I was some sort of digital vagabond begging for clicks. I said, "Yeah, sure," something like that. My sister shot me a glance from across the table, the kind that said, "Are you gonna tell them?" But I shook my head. Not yet. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't yelling. It isn't throwing the pie or flipping the table or posting a rant on Facebook. Sometimes it's waiting. It's letting them laugh while the ground under their feet shifts and they don't even realize it. It's sitting through the mockery because you already know how the next chapter ends. When dessert was over and people started peeling off to the living room, Melissa cornered me near the sink, wine glass in hand, lips already stained. "You should come by my bridal shower next month," she said, tapping my arm like we were suddenly besties. "We'll need some, creative energy around. You know how it is." "Yeah," I said, letting the word hang for a second longer than necessary. "I do." She didn't notice the edge in my voice. She was too busy listing off her color palettes and signature cocktails. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed again in my back pocket. Same sender. Same subject line. But this time, the preview said, "Final confirmation. Your work will be displayed from." I didn't even finish reading it. I just smiled. Again. Bigger this time. Because sometimes, the last slice of pie isn't about dessert. It's about knowing you're finally full. Have you ever had someone close to you laugh at your dreams, and you had to smile through it like it didn't rip something open inside you? Like it didn't sit there afterward, heavy and hot in your chest, long after the conversation had moved on and everyone else forgot it even happened? Maybe it was a sibling or a friend, or someone you used to trust before they reminded you that to them, your dream is a punchline. What did you do? Did you swallow it or spit it back out? Let me tell you what I did. I kept going. Not because I was brave or proud or immune to humiliation, no, it wasn't that poetic. I kept going because I didn't know what else to do with myself. Because art was the only thing that ever made sense when nothing else did. Because even though people kept calling it a hobby, it felt like breathing to me. And what the hell do you do when the thing that keeps you alive is the same thing they keep telling you to quit? I dropped out of college at 21, halfway through a degree in communications that I picked because I didn't know what I wanted, and that's what everyone kept saying made sense. Communications. Like I needed help saying things. I was already saying everything I needed to through my sketches, my pen lines, the weird little animated clips I made in free trial software because I couldn't afford anything else. After I left school, I moved into a studio apartment above a laundromat that smelled like wet denim and burnt plastic. My mattress was a twin on the floor. My desk was an old wooden door balanced on two filing cabinets. I worked odd jobs during the day, barista, delivery guy, copy shop clerk, and drew every night until my eyes blurred. I lived off instant ramen and diner coffee. I showered when I could. I cried more times than I'll admit. The emails came like clockwork, usually starting with "unfortunately" or "thank you for your submission," and ending with "best of luck." I kept every one of them in a folder labeled fuel. I opened that folder a lot. My family never asked about that folder. They never really asked about much. Every Thanksgiving, every 4th of July, every cookout in someone's backyard where the paper plates bent under the weight of potato salad, someone would ask me how my little drawings were going. Like I was still 7 years old doodling cartoons in church bulletins. My uncle even once said I should try designing tattoos for a living, like that was the natural trajectory for people who couldn't figure life out. Everyone laughed. So did I. But one night, after finishing a shift at a crappy delivery job where someone tipped me with leftover Halloween candy in February, I sat down at my desk door, opened my laptop, and stared at a blank screen for almost an hour. Something cracked that night. I was tired. Not just physically, but bone-deep tired. I started writing an email to a local tech recruiter, thinking maybe I'd just give in, learn JavaScript, get an office job, fade into the background with a stable paycheck and a soul slowly turning to mulch. Then I got a message. It was short. Just, "Loved your piece, Echoes. Do you take commissions?" The sender was someone I'd never heard of, but I clicked through their profile, art director for a boutique music label in New York. I blinked at the screen like it was a hallucination. I replied yes before I even asked what the job was. They wanted a cover design. A single illustration. One piece. For a small indie band they were launching that spring. I worked on it for 4 days straight, barely eating, barely sleeping, pouring everything I had left into it like it was my last shot. When I sent it back, the director replied in all caps, "Holy shit. This is exactly what I wanted." That single piece ended up on a billboard in Brooklyn. It was small, just a neighborhood corner ad, but I drove 3 hours to see it in person, standing in the cold, pretending I was waiting for a friend just to stare at my own work in the open air. I took a picture. I didn't post it. I didn't say a word to anyone. I just kept it on my phone and looked at it when the rejections rolled in again, which they still did, over and over. But something had shifted. Not overnight, not in a big Hollywood moment, but slowly, quietly. I got a few more commissions. A couple album covers. Then an animation job. Then a small feature in an online magazine. Nothing that made me rich, but enough to stop delivering pizzas. And then, 1 month before last Thanksgiving, came the email. The subject line was so vague I almost deleted it. Open call artist showcase, opportunity confirmation. But I opened it anyway, because you always open them, even the ones that'll hurt. This one didn't hurt. This one made my throat close. They wanted to feature one of my digital installations in Times Square. One of those giant screens. Prime evening slot. 2 full minutes. Millions of people walking by. I read it 3 times, then stood up and walked around the apartment, trying to figure out if I was dreaming, if this was another scam, if I was being punked by some bitter art school dropout. But it was real. I double-checked everything. I emailed back, trying to sound cool. They replied the next day with the word confirmed and a contract. I told no one. Not because I didn't want to share it, but because I wanted the moment to be mine, fully mine, before the world got their hands on it. Before the family found some way to laugh about it. Before Melissa called it cute or my uncle asked if it was a prank. Before anyone could reduce it to another story they didn't understand. So I sat at that Thanksgiving table with a secret burning in my pocket and a smile on my face. And right as Melissa finished her second dig about how everyone needs a creative outlet, my phone buzzed in my lap. I glanced down and there it was. Subject line, confirmed for Times Square, final details enclosed. I didn't say a word. I just reached for my coffee, took a slow sip, and smiled. I woke up that morning to the sound of a garbage truck screeching down the block and the soft hum of my radiator clanging like it was choking on ghosts from the night before. The sun hadn't even pushed through the blinds yet, and the sky outside was that thick gray that makes the city look like it's stuck in black and white. I sat up slowly, the stale coffee from last night still sitting on the table, cold and bitter as hell, but I drank it anyway. There was a buzz in my chest I couldn't shake, a quiet energy that had nothing to do with caffeine or anxiety. Today wasn't just another day. I knew that before I even stood up. I checked my phone, and the email was still there, just like I left it. Confirmed for Times Square. I tapped the screen again, like the words might disappear if I didn't look at them often enough. There it was in bold. The time slot, the dimensions of the display, the name of the curator who'd signed off on the piece. All of it was real. And in less than 2 hours, my work would be up there, towering over a street I had only ever walked through as a tourist with my head craned back and my hands buried deep in my pockets, pretending I wasn't awestruck. I threw on a coat, didn't even bother to shower, just brushed my teeth and grabbed my sketch pad out of habit, even though I wouldn't need it. I took the subway because it felt right, because something about riding in that grimy tin can with strangers always grounded me, reminded me of where I'd come from and what it took to still be here. I didn't even try to check my phone the whole ride. I just stared out the window at the reflection of myself, faint and half-flickering behind the dirty glass. I got off near 42nd and 8th and walked the last block, heart beating like it had something to prove. The city was already awake, not in that poetic, sleepy kind of way, but full throttle awake, street performers setting up their acts, delivery trucks double-parked, tourists pointing at stuff they'd only seen in movies. And then I looked up. There it was. Huge. Alive. Unapologetic. My piece, a fluid digital animation of a face breaking apart into color and sound, filled the screen above a chain restaurant that usually blasted discount drinks in neon. It was surreal, watching something that had once only lived in my sketchbook move with that kind of power. People stopped to look, some took pictures, A couple just walked past like it was any other ad. But I stood there, right on the edge of the sidewalk, feeling like my chest might crack open. And that's when my phone started buzzing. At first it was just one message, then another, then 5. Then I opened it and they came pouring in so fast I couldn't even keep up. Instagram tags, Twitter mentions, DMs from people I hadn't heard from in years. People I didn't know congratulating me. A couple gallery owners asking for availability. A producer asking if I'd ever considered working in film. It was like someone had uncorked a bottle I didn't even know was sealed. I didn't even see the message from Melissa at first. It got buried under all the others. Turns out, she wasn't even the first in the family to find out. Her fiancé, Scott, the tall guy with too much hair gel and a Bluetooth earpiece permanently glued to his jaw, was walking to a meeting in Midtown and saw it by accident. Apparently, he'd been looking down at his phone when someone near him said, "That's wild," and he looked up just in time to catch my name in giant letters. He snapped a photo, probably out of shock, and sent it to Melissa before he even crossed the intersection. According to my sister, who forwarded me the screen caps later, Melissa didn't believe it at first. She thought it was someone with the same name, or maybe a glitch, until she zoomed in and saw the signature in the bottom corner, my actual handwriting. She didn't say anything for almost an hour after that. Then the text started. First one was simple, "Is that really yours?" I didn't answer. Then another, "Ryan, that art thing in Times Square. Yours?" Still nothing. Then she upped the tone, "Hey Ryan, I've got a favor to ask." I stared at it for a full minute, that slow, sugary build-up like honey poured over a knife. That hey with 3 Ys, like we'd been best friends since kindergarten. Like she hadn't taken a dump on my dreams 12 hours ago. Like her voice hadn't oozed sarcasm in front of the whole damn family. I didn't even open it fully. I just watched the preview on the lock screen, smiling in that way that feels dangerous, like you know you're holding a card no one expects you to play. I took one more look at my piece up on the screen, watched it loop from beginning to end, the colors blooming and collapsing in rhythm, and then turned away. Because in that moment, I didn't need anyone's approval. Not hers. Not my uncle's. Not the family's. They had laughed at my dreams so many times that by the time it finally roared to life, their voices didn't matter anymore. But still, I couldn't help myself. I opened the message and typed back 2 words, "What favor?" And I hit send. There's something uniquely fascinating about the way people shift their tone when they suddenly realize you've become useful to them, like a switch flips and all that quiet condescension gets washed over with syrupy charm and fake concern. Melissa's text came barely an hour after I confirmed that, yes, that was indeed my art up there on the giant screen in Times Square, and no, I didn't pay someone to fake it, and no, it wasn't just one of those virtual billboard apps. Her exact words, after a suspicious amount of exclamation points, were, "So I've been thinking. We could really use your amazing creative eye for our wedding invites." Notice the sudden use of we, as if Scott had also somehow been dreaming of hiring me ever since he saw my work above a TGI Fridays. But what really got me was the tone. That blend of breathy excitement and calculated softness women like Melissa have mastered since middle school, when they learned it got them what they wanted without ever having to say please. And in that moment, standing in my living room surrounded by empty coffee cups and half-crumpled sketches, I realized something. I could say yes. Not because I wanted to do it. Not because I needed the money, although let's be honest, I wasn't exactly rolling in cash despite my 15 seconds of digital fame. And definitely not because I felt guilty. I said yes because I wanted to see what would happen when I gave Melissa exactly what she asked for on the surface anyway. Sure, I wrote back, I'd be happy to help. Let's keep it simple and professional. She responded in less than a minute, like she'd been staring at her phone waiting for the reply. Yay! You're a lifesaver. I'll send my vision board tonight. Vision board. Even the phrase made my skin crawl. And she delivered, just like she promised, around 9 that evening. One gigantic PDF file, 27 pages of clashing fonts, butchered color schemes, and more glittery, Pinterest-worthy garbage than I thought possible to assemble in one document. There were bows on everything. Literally everything. Paper bows, digital bows, embossed bows. And roses. Cream roses, blush roses, dusty lavender roses, the kind of artificial elegance that screams this looks expensive, even when it clearly isn't. The entire theme, if you could call it that, was some Frankenstein hybrid of rustic barn wedding meets Beverly Hills glam meets dollar store princess fantasy. There were clip art swans. There were hearts made of intertwined initials. There were gold foil cursive samples that looked like something pulled straight off the packaging of a Valentine's Day perfume. It was, in short, a designer's worst nightmare. But I didn't say that. I told her, got it. I'll get to work on some concepts and send over drafts next week. And that was the moment I decided to make something different. See, what Melissa didn't understand, what most people like her never understand, is that design isn't just about making something pretty. It's about capturing tone, mood, message. She wanted wedding invitations, but I was about to give her a story. Not an obvious insult, not anything that could be pointed at and gasped over in front of the family as rude or inappropriate, but something deeper, something layered, something she'd feel before she fully understood it. I started working that same night, not because I was inspired, but because my head was spinning with ideas that felt just sharp enough to sting. I didn't want to humiliate her, not exactly. That wasn't the goal. But I wanted her to know, with every line and every choice I made, that this wasn't some amateur favor for a cousin she used to mock. This was a professional piece of art. And beneath the surface, a message. The palette I picked was clean, elegant, but cold. Slate gray with muted lilac, romantic, yes, but restrained, almost distant. The typography was formal, serifed, and a little antique, like something you'd find in an old letter, the kind of text that felt more like a document than an invitation. I embedded a faint pattern in the background, subtle enough to go unnoticed unless you really looked, a twisting vine that, on closer inspection, was made up of thorn-like lines, curling and constricting. On the front cover, instead of a swooning pose or hearts and swirls, I designed a minimalist symbol, two birds, facing away from each other, their wings almost touching but never quite meeting. It looked tasteful. It looked professional. It also looked cold. And I knew, without a doubt, that Melissa wouldn't notice at first. She'd probably squeal at the fonts, love that it didn't feel cheap, and forward it to her bridesmaids with a caption like, "So chic." But someone would see it eventually. Her mom, maybe? Or Scott's sister. Someone would pause long enough to tilt their head and say, "Wait, doesn't this feel?" I don't know, kind of sad. But that was the point. I wasn't just giving Melissa wedding invites. I was giving her an echo of who she was. Beautiful, polished, but hollow underneath. I spent the next 2 days refining every line, making sure it was flawless, print-ready, and just distant enough to make her feel slightly uncomfortable, not enough to say anything out loud, but enough to keep her from bragging about it too much. I wanted it to linger, just like that night at Thanksgiving had lingered in me. When I sent the first draft over, I included a short message. Let me know your thoughts. I aimed for something clean and timeless. If it's not what you had in mind, happy to revise. I could almost hear her hesitation in the delay between the time I saw her read the message and when her reply finally came through. Wow, this is not what I expected. But it's kinda cool. Let me check with Scott. Kinda cool. I smiled because I knew what that meant. She didn't hate it, but it didn't make her feel like the center of the universe either. And that right there was the point. It didn't take long for the whispers to start, that low-level family buzz that always seems to crawl through the cracks before you've even told your side of the story. It began, as these things often do, with a call from my mother. She had that tight, careful tone she always used when she was trying to sound neutral but had already made up her mind about something. So, she said, not even bothering with a hello, I heard you're helping Melissa with her wedding invitations? I could hear the silence behind her voice, like she was bracing for an answer that would either disappoint her or confirm whatever gossip was already making its rounds through our scattered clan. I didn't even ask how she found out. It could have been my aunt, or maybe one of Melissa's bridesmaids blabbing to a second cousin. Information like that didn't need wings in our family. It traveled on instinct. Yeah, I said finally, keeping my tone flat. She asked. I said sure. There was a pause. One of those heavy ones that seems to press through the line, thicker than air. And why, exactly, are you helping her? Now, I could have gone into the whole explanation about professionalism, about boundaries, about how I didn't want to stoop to her level, or how I was above holding a grudge over one snide comment. But the truth is, I didn't really know why I was doing it anymore. Maybe I started out thinking I could turn it into some subtle, poetic revenge. Maybe I thought I could kill her with kindness, make her squirm just enough to feel the weight of everything she'd done over the years without ever having to raise my voice. But something about my mother's question hit harder than I expected. It pulled something loose. Something old. I remembered being 9 years old at one of those same family barbecues, the kind where the grown-ups stayed half drunk and half asleep in lawn chairs while the kids ran wild in the yard. I'd drawn a portrait of the backyard, sketched it quick on lined notebook paper with a pencil I sharpened down to a nub. I showed it to Melissa, proud of it in that way only kids can be, totally sincere, totally open. She took one look and laughed. Not just a giggle, either, but a full-blown cackle, loud enough to make other kids look over. Why are the people so ugly, she'd said. They look like potato heads. I remember wanting to shrink into the ground, my face burning so hot I thought I might melt the drawing in my hands. I remember folding the paper 4 times and stuffing it in my pocket, pretending like I didn't care. But I did. Of course I did. That same summer, she accidentally spilled juice on a stack of drawings I'd brought to show my uncle, who'd once been an art teacher. She said it was an accident. My sister said otherwise. My mom made excuses. Melissa just smiled, that same rehearsed, innocent smile she wore like armor. And now here we were, 25 years later, and she was asking for my help like none of it ever happened. Like we were old friends. Like we had some shared creative language that made us equals. The thing was, part of me wanted to say no. Still did. Part of me wanted to throw the whole project in the trash and tell her to find someone else, some Fiverr freelancer who'd toss glitter on a template and call it a day. But the other part, the one that had been underestimated, dismissed, laughed at for years, that part wanted to finish it. Not for her. Not even for the family. For me. I wanted to finish it my way. The first draft I'd sent her was careful, tight, restrained. It was passive-aggressive in the most elegant sense, the kind of design that looked polished on the surface, but underneath, said something entirely different. But now I didn't want elegance. I wanted honesty. I wanted to design something that didn't pretend to smile while bleeding on the inside. So I opened my tablet, pulled up a blank canvas, and started sketching again. This time, I went in a different direction. No more cold minimalism. No more subtle digs. I started drawing a set of hands rough, realistic, sketched in detail, reaching out but never touching, positioned above a field of wildflowers that looked almost too perfect. Each hand held a piece of ribbon, twisting in midair, tangled in a knot that could never be undone. It was abstract, sure, but it had meaning. The hands were Melissa and Scott, all polished on the outside, but disconnected underneath. The ribbons were the pressure, family expectations, fake smiles, the weight of appearances. The flowers? The wedding. Picture perfect. Shallow-rooted. I didn't even know if I'd send it. But I kept working on it, hour after hour, layering shadows and textures until I could barely see straight. Because something in me needed to get it out, this resentment, this ache that had been lodged in my chest for decades, this quiet fury I'd carried ever since I was the kid who got laughed at for trying. Helping her might have started as a power play. But now it felt like something else entirely. A purge. I wasn't just making art anymore. I was digging up history. And with every line I drew, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, this was the only language we'd ever speak. Not words. Not apologies. Just images. And truth. Even when it wasn't what she asked for. The invitations were printed on thick, ivory stock that felt heavy in the hand, like something that should be handled with care, like something meant to be passed down in a family album or saved between the pages of a book no one reads anymore. The ink was a deep, muted charcoal, not quite black, not quite gray, and the design stretched across the cover in bold, quiet lines that demanded you take your time. It didn't glitter. It didn't sparkle. It didn't wink at you with bows or pastel cliches. It just stood there, steady, confident, unapologetically not what Melissa had asked for. I hadn't sent her a final proof. It wasn't an accident. The printer had owed me a favor, one of those mutual struggle relationships you build when both of you have been trying to make something out of nothing for the better part of a decade. I told him what I wanted, made sure he understood every detail, and I paid up front, no questions asked. When the boxes arrived at Melissa's condo, hand-delivered by a courier service she probably assumed was some elite wedding vendor, she had no idea what was inside. She texted me later that day with 4 words, "Got the invites." Opening now. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat back in my chair, turned off my notifications, and waited. It took 12 minutes. 12 whole minutes of silence before her name exploded across my screen in all caps. The messages came rapid fire, like she was hammering the keys with manicured rage. What is this? This is not what we talked about. I showed you my board. Where are the gold accents? And then, finally, the one I was waiting for. Are you messing with me? I let her sit with it. 20 minutes passed. 30. Then I answered, calmly, like nothing was wrong. It's art, I typed. Maybe you just don't get it. The design, to the untrained eye, was beautiful, clean, dramatic, modern with an edge of melancholy that you couldn't quite place. But to Melissa, it was something else entirely. She knew. She saw it. The moment her eyes moved past the symmetrical layout and elegant lines, the moment her gaze lingered on the subtle details, she felt it in her gut. The hands were still there, faintly etched behind the text like shadows in a fog, reaching, grasping, never quite touching. The wildflowers had been moved to the border, delicate and wilting, drawn with just enough detail to feel wrong if you stared too long. And the ribbon? That twisting knot was there, hidden in the corner of the RSVP card, wound so tight it was practically choking itself. It was all metaphor, all message, and none of it had been approved. Scott apparently didn't even notice. He called it clean and modern and told Melissa it looked expensive, which seemed to calm her down for about 5 seconds before the reality sank in that she'd lost control of the narrative. Because that's what this was for her, not a wedding, not a celebration of love or any of that fairy tale fluff. This was an event, a production, a curated performance designed to show every friend, coworker, and distant family member that she had it all figured out. And here I was, the cousin she mocked, the dropout with the little art thing, injecting truth into her fantasy with a scalpel. She called me. Not text. Not email. An actual phone call. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Then I listened to the message with one earbud in and a beer in my hand, the kind of cheap lager you drink not for taste, but because you've earned the damn right to kick back. I don't know what kind of joke this is, Ryan, but it's not funny. People are asking questions. My mom said the design looks cold, and one of Scott's aunts asked if we were getting divorced before we even got married. What the hell, Ryan? Seriously, call me back. I didn't. Not right away. I sat with it for a while. Because here's the thing about people like Melissa, they think they can control the story, twist it in their favor, sell it to others like a polished brand with just enough shine to distract from the rot underneath. And usually, they're right. Usually, no one pushes back. No one risks the conflict. But I wasn't that kid anymore, the one whose drawings got laughed at in backyards, the one who folded up his work and buried it in his pockets. Now I had a platform, a name, a voice. And if Melissa wanted art, she was going to get art, even if she didn't like what it showed her. That night, I got a text from my sister. "Did you send those on purpose?" she asked. I replied with a single word. Absolutely. She didn't respond for a while, and when she finally did, she just said, "Good." For the next 2 days, the group chats lit up. One cousin said the invites were too edgy. Another said they were stunning, like something out of an art exhibit. A third just asked, "Wait, Ryan did these?" Melissa didn't post a single thing on Instagram. Not one story. Not one filter-covered photo. Total silence. And honestly, that was louder than any complaint she could have thrown at me. The sky was overcast the morning of the wedding, not stormy or ominous in the cinematic sense, just dull and flat, like the world was holding its breath and hadn't yet decided what mood to wear for the day. I arrived early, not because I wanted to be there longer, but because showing up late would have felt like giving Melissa the satisfaction of thinking I was scared to face her. I wasn't. Not anymore. I'd walked through enough of her passive-aggressive landmines over the years to learn how to keep my steps measured and my face calm, even when the ground shifted beneath me. The venue was one of those countryside estates that tried a little too hard to feel rustic, reclaimed wood, string lights, mason jars full of peonies, the whole Pinterest-core aesthetic they sold to people who wanted charm, without the inconvenience of actual dirt. It looked nice, I won't lie. It was beautiful in that predictable, performative kind of way. The kind of place built for pictures, not memories. I walked in through the back entrance, hoping to avoid the early wave of bridesmaids and the inevitable awkward greetings from relatives I hadn't seen since the last funeral or graduation. But even slipping through the side didn't save me from the whispers. They started almost immediately, hushed tones, quick glances, the unmistakable way someone's voice drops when they know they're talking about a person who just walked into the room. "There he is. That's him, right? Ryan, the one who did the invites." "Oh, that cousin." It didn't bother me like it used to. Honestly, it felt like background noise, the same song on repeat, just quieter now because none of them had the guts to say it to my face. I found my assigned seat, halfway back and far from the front rows reserved for the ones who still bought into the illusion that this day was about love and not spectacle. I sat, smoothed the creases in my black jacket, and watched the room fill. Then she appeared. Melissa entered the room like a politician, all smiles and soft waves, greeting people with just enough warmth to pass for sincerity. Her dress was exactly what I expected, white, obviously, but over-designed to the point of confusion, like 3 gowns layered into one, each piece screaming for attention. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless. But her eyes? They were restless, scanning the room every few seconds, looking for me. I saw the flicker of recognition when she spotted me. Her smile faltered just slightly, a microsecond of real emotion before she recovered, raising her chin and drifting toward her next social obligation. She didn't say anything. Not yet. But I could tell by the stiffness in her posture that she hadn't forgotten. Not the invitations. Not the symbols. Not the message. The ceremony was short, mercifully so. A few too long readings, a slightly awkward vow exchange, and a kiss that felt more practiced than passionate. People clapped. Someone cried. Flashbulbs went off. And I sat there, still, unreadable, watching it all like I was observing a scene from a play I'd already seen a dozen times before. During the reception, I stayed on the edges. People tried to pull me into conversations, a couple of second cousins I barely remembered, some aunt whose name escaped me, but I kept my responses short, polite, distant. I wasn't there to reconnect. I was there because I wanted to see the final act of the drama I'd been cast in without auditioning. Melissa found me near the bar, halfway through a glass of watered-down whiskey I didn't even want. She walked up alone, her heels clicking too loudly against the polished floor. That same smile was on her face, but this time it didn't even try to reach her eyes. "Hey, Ryan." I turned slowly, gave her a nod. "Melissa." We stood there in silence for a moment, the awkward tension hanging between us like a string pulled too tight. Behind her, people danced. Someone spilled a drink. A kid screamed. None of it reached us. "So," she said finally, "I guess you think you're clever." I took a sip from my glass, let the taste burn a little on the way down. "I think I did what you asked me to do." Her laugh was quiet, bitter. "That's not what I asked for, and you know it." I looked her in the eye. "I gave you a piece of art. If you wanted a template, you should have hired someone else." She crossed her arms, the fabric of her dress pulling slightly at the seams. "Why did you do it, Ryan?" "Honestly. Was it payback? Some kind of petty revenge?" There it was. The question she'd probably been holding onto for weeks, maybe longer. And now she wanted the answer wrapped in a bow, something she could dissect later with her bridesmaids over brunch and mimosas. I finished my drink, placed the glass gently on the table beside me, and looked at her, really looked at her, not as the girl who laughed at my drawings, not as the woman who threw parties full of fake smiles, but as someone who had never once seen me as an equal. I said it softly, but clear enough to carry over the noise of the room. "Because I'm still doing that little art thing." Her expression didn't change right away. She held my gaze for a long second, and then something flickered in her eyes, confusion, maybe, or regret, or that deep, uncomfortable realization that the person you always thought was beneath you might have grown taller while you weren't looking. She didn't say anything else. Just turned and walked away. And I let her. The thing about moments like that, confrontations wrapped in velvet, words sharp enough to leave clean wounds, is that you never really know when they end. One minute you're standing in a reception hall under two bright chandeliers, saying the line you've been waiting years to deliver, and the next, you're sitting alone in your apartment at 2 a.m, replaying it all like a scene from a film you can't quite decide if you liked or hated. The applause fades. The music stops. But the tension doesn't go anywhere. It lingers. In the weeks that followed Melissa's wedding, my life began to change in ways I hadn't expected, and certainly not at that speed. The Times Square showcase had gone viral in a slow-burn way. Someone had filmed it on their phone, tagged me in the background, and by the end of that week, I was fielding emails from agencies, design firms, indie directors, and even a marketing exec from a brand I used to mock for selling overpriced sneakers. My website traffic doubled overnight. Then it tripled. Then it crashed because my old hosting plan couldn't handle the spike. People who once left me on read were now sliding into my DMs with words like collaboration and creative synergy. A small production company in Toronto wanted me to design an animated title sequence for their festival film. A San Francisco tech startup asked if I'd create an installation for their new office lobby. Even a popular podcast wanted me on to talk about the emotional undercurrent of visual storytelling in modern art, which I wasn't even sure I could define, but I nodded along and said yes anyway. Success didn't feel like I imagined it would. It didn't come with a parade. It didn't erase the years of being ignored, of being mocked, of wondering if I was just clinging to something nobody else believed in. It was quieter, stranger. Like someone turning up the volume on your life slowly until you realized people were finally listening, not because you'd changed, but because you'd stopped asking for their permission. And yet, something still felt off. Melissa had gone silent. No angry texts. No passive-aggressive comments in the group chat. No updates, no photos, no thinly veiled digs buried in Instagram captions. Just silence. At first, it felt like a victory. Like she'd finally backed down, finally understood that her words had limits, that her polished veneer could crack when faced with truth delivered in ink and design and intent. But after a while, that silence stopped feeling like peace. It started feeling like pressure, like something waiting to drop. And then, one night, it did. I got the message at 1:20 in the morning. The name popped up on my phone like a ghost, Melissa Hudson, followed by a wall of text so long I had to scroll to see it all. It wasn't angry. It wasn't apologetic either. It was strange. Honest, in the way only exhaustion can be. The kind of late-night vulnerability people never show in daylight. She wrote about the wedding, how it had felt like performing a version of her life instead of living it. How the invitations had embarrassed her at first, then made her really think for the first time in years. She said everyone assumed she was confident, put together, perfect, and that the pressure to maintain that image was suffocating. She admitted that when we were kids, mocking me made her feel stronger, more secure, like tearing me down would stop people from seeing how insecure she really was. She didn't say sorry. Not exactly. But it was something. She ended with a question. Did you hate me? And there I was again, standing at a cliff's edge, a reply hanging just under my fingertips, the cursor blinking like it had a pulse of its own. Part of me wanted to answer right away, say everything I'd ever wanted to say, unload years of held-back pain and bitterness, and maybe even forgiveness. Another part of me, the part that had learned the value of silence, just stared at the screen, unmoving. Because the truth is, I didn't know what to say. Did I hate her? No. But I didn't trust her either. And I didn't believe that one long, late-night confession made everything disappear. People don't change that fast. They don't turn decades of damage into clarity with one message sent from a phone glowing in the dark while their husband sleeps 2 feet away. And yet, I felt something shift. Not closure. Not reconciliation. Just weight. The weight of understanding. The weight of knowing we'd never be friends, but we'd always be connected by blood, by history, by a single moment in Times Square and a set of invitations that spoke louder than any toast ever could. I sat there a long time, rereading her words, letting the meaning settle in places I didn't expect it to reach. Outside, the city hummed quietly. Inside, the cursor blinked. And my finger hovered over the reply button, not quite touching it, not quite pulling away. Did I answer? Maybe, maybe not. Some things don't need a final word. Some things are better left unfinished, left lingering in the space between two people who finally saw each other clearly, even if it was too late to fix what they'd broken.